All right, hi everybody, and welcome to Ideation Week. We are now moving into the second stage of the design process. You can see here that it's sometimes called the sketching phase or ideation. Either works, it's an interchangeable term here. So before we begin, what we want to do is just talk about the purpose of ideation. And so I'm going to ask you to do a think, pair, share. So you can just talk as a group about what is the purpose of ideation. So I'll give you a few minutes to do this. You can actually just pause the video here and have that discussion amongst yourselves. And when we're thinking about ideation, it really allows designers, in this case our students, to generate a number of different ideas or solutions. And we like to give them a designated amount of time to come up with lots of ideas and lots of solutions. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. So we are actually going to go through our own ideation. We are going to learn about Lotus Blossom today and also Crazy Eights, but you are going to be going through your own brainstorming session as teachers here before we think about how we are going to be doing this with our students. And so when we are thinking about ideation, what we really think about is how our thinking goes divergently. And so we have our challenge or topic or issue here in the center. And then you can see we've come up with lots of different ideas. So it's really about that divergent thinking where we kind of are thinking about those blue sky ideas and how we are going to be solving this problem. From there, we like to go convergently with our thinking. So we narrow back down in and find out the similarities and think about, okay, now we can narrow in on one other idea before we start to think divergently again. So it's really about this divergent and convergent thinking before we get to that final solution. And so we are going to be doing our own brainstorming in the form of a lotus blossom. So you want to make sure you have a piece of paper and something to write with in front of you. You can also use sticky notes for this activity if you have them in front of you, but it is not necessary. We are going to be going through 2 different rounds of ideation with Lotus Blossom for a topic that you are going to be looking at. But before we do that, we just want to explain what Lotus Blossom is in case you're unfamiliar with it. So you can see here our challenge or our topic or our problem is put at the center of the page. And then we have come up with 8 different ideas on how we might solve that problem. So again, if you think of our example of disengaged youth voters, we put the topic of voting in the center, and we came up with 8 different ideas on how we might engage young adults to become more active in the voting process. So a couple of ideas that we came up with was this app that students could vote through. We wanted to have social media preferences and influences. We wanted to conduct surveys on the issues that matter to youth. We thought, why not put voting stations in areas that they might be frequenting? And so if we're thinking about university and college kids, we might be putting voting stations near public spaces like bars. We wanted to have a town hall idea. We wanted to use alternative media like Vice News, and we wanted to also come up with an idea of local meetups. So you can see here it's 8 different ways on how we might solve this problem of disengaged youth voters. And you may remember when we went through the user discovery piece that thinking about how our users really like technology, which is why we brought in the Snapchat piece here. They really like social media. We also wanted to include app influences and be able to have areas that really spoke to them and that was able to really engage them in the voting process here. So your topic that you are going to be looking at is really about this idea of ideation in the classroom. And so the question I want to pose to you is how might we effectively use ideation tools in the classroom? And I want you to think beyond just the scope of this kindergarten redesign project. So think about all the classes that you teach and all the students that you teach, and think of 8 different ways that you could effectively use ideation tools in the classroom. So it might be for different projects, it might be for story writing, for example, but thinking about 8 different ideas for that. What I would encourage you to do is set a timer for about 5 minutes. And then with that, how might we question in the center of your page, you can spend 5 minutes coming up with 8 different ideas on how to solve that. Again, this is a great place to pause the video and to really test that out. The second round of Lotus Blossom goes deeper on one idea. So we've just come up with 8 different ideas for that how might we question. And now what I want you to do is take one of those ideas and how could you actually make that a reality? So what are 8 other related ideas to that? So if you remember our Lotus Blossom that we did for our disengaged youth voters, one of the ideas we came up with was this voting app. And so we took that one and wanted to go deeper in that. And you can see here we basically came up with 8 different screens and 8 different ideas on how this voters app could look like and how it could work. So we've included things like a welcome video from a trusted source. We wanted to have live meetings with candidates that were posted on this app. We wanted to provide individuals with locations on where they could vote, so they could put in their address and then know where to vote. So you can see here that we've come up with 8 ideas to go deeper on this one. And so you are going to be doing the same with your initial Lotus Blossom. And what you are going to be looking at in this second round is how might we support a student who is stuck. So if you've come up with these ideas for how to use ideation in the classroom, what are you going to do when a student is stuck? What are some questions you can generate to push them to go deeper? So there are different ways that you can think about this brainstorming topic, but what you want to do is just go deeper on those initial ideas. Again, this is a great time to pause that video and to maybe set yourself another 5-minute timer and to go deep in this idea. When you're working with students, before they can actually start to think about ideas for this playground apparatus, or if you're using the design process in other areas of your classroom as well, it's super important to determine the constraints that students must work within before they begin ideation. So in this case, we are thinking about this redesign, and we need to consider, okay, which grade is actually making up the design team? So who actually unpacked the problem with those kindergarten students? Who else have they spoken to? So have they talked to any experts in the field? And who is actually going to be building the prototype for this playground? So these people are the ones that should be setting the criteria. And we also need to figure out which grade is going through ideation. Are they aware of the constraints, and how are they being made aware of these constraints here? So a couple of questions we want to think about are what components must be included in the playground design. So again, if you're thinking about safety, so maybe you need a fence, maybe there's a slide that you want to incorporate, so that is a must as well, or swings, or perhaps thinking about the floor or the ground, sorry. So you might be thinking about it must include some sort of soft, spongy floor, and that way students aren't getting hurt. You may also want to think about making sure the materials are environmentally friendly. You also want to consider if students have spoken to a company who may build the playground. So what are their specific requirements? If they are building this space for these students, what are some of those things that are non-negotiables that must be included? And it's very important that these are included before ideation so that students make sure their solutions are informed by these constraints. They can also go through a tool or an activity called Crazy Eights for ideation. And to do this, you want to take a piece of legal size paper, fold it in half 3 times to create 8 boxes. So you can fold it widthwise, then lengthwise, then widthwise. And when you open it back up, you will have 8 boxes. Then you can set a timer. So we suggest allowing 40 seconds per square, where they are going to draw one sketch using pictures and words within that 40-second time period before they move on to box 3, then box 4, and so on and so forth. You also want to make sure they are remembering the how might we question they are addressing. And so thinking about this playground redesign, what were some of those ideas that those kindergarten students came up with that they said, you know, this is what we want to make sure is included? What were their unmet needs in relation to this idea? And making sure that those are all included within their ideas here. So this is an example of what Crazy Eights might look like when it's completed. You can see that stick figures are welcome. We use a Sharpie to draw these ideas, and that way students aren't getting too bogged down in the details of their drawings, but it also means that they can't erase their drawings. And you can see here where we've drawn the lines, that is representing where the folds would be on that page. Then what you want to do is give students the opportunity to build out these ideas in greater detail. So again, Crazy Eights should be done independently. It's important that students are given the opportunity to brainstorm on their own before they have to share their ideas with others. It makes sure everybody's ideas are heard, and it also allows many ideas to be brought to the table. So the first option for storyboard is to choose several ideas from their Crazy Eights and show 3 different features of their solution. So you can see we've just used an 11 by 17 piece of paper here. We've got 3 large sticky notes. They've written their how might we question up at the top, drawn a little sketch on the sticky note, and then next to it they've included in detail what is happening at that particular stage. So if you are thinking about your project, you may be thinking, students may be thinking of features of the playground that they may want to include, and they want to, in their explanation on the side, explain why they've chosen this particular design and how it really meets the needs of all of those kindergarten students. You may also want to ensure that they are including, again, that environmental piece, so how they're choosing environmental friendly materials, and that could be included in the explanation as well. You may also take one idea from Crazy Eights and explain it in 3 steps by answering first this happens, then this happens, then this. So it's more of a process. This idea could work for your playground redesign, although it would be only if there's like a more complex component to this design here, where it's saying, okay, well, first this is going to happen, then this, and then this. So you may want to have students just focus on 3 different features to get feedback on that before we think about prototyping, which will come in the next live video. So again, there's 2 different options for storyboards, and both of these are included in detail within the curriculum. Then it's important that students are getting feedback on their ideas. So we don't want to go just from coming up with ideas to prototyping and then building this playground apparatus. It's really important that we are getting feedback in the form of critiques. And you may want to do a round of silent critiques where students are giving feedback using like 2 stars and a wish format by writing down their notes, or you might want to use dot stickers to put dots on ideas that they like. And then you can follow up with out loud critiques. So that is moving into the 3rd step of the design process here. But part of critiques is really about ensuring that designers have incorporated the criteria. So did they incorporate the criteria from their users? Did they incorporate the criteria from the builders? And did they incorporate the criteria from what was set by the designers? It's really, again, about pulling out the positive and highlighting those opportunities. So we like to think of this as 2 stars and a wish. So, or 2 ideas that they really liked about the designer's sketch, and what is 1 wish that they have for it. Again, when you're setting up students to go through critiques, you want to make sure they are not critiquing things like spelling or somebody's drawing ability. It's really about the ideas that they have put down on paper there. So a couple of questions to consider are: which grade team will be responsible for critiques? How will the critiquing team and the design team coordinate to discuss these highlights and opportunities? Because this is going to be really important when we think about iteration. And so you want to make sure that everybody who is part of the critiques team is very aware of the criteria that has been set, and that they have been able to communicate to the designers those different highlights and opportunities, because the designers will need to go back and iterate on their ideas. So as always, we hope that you post any questions that you have to Slack, and also share some of the processes of what you've been going through with this project. We'd love to create this collaborative learning environment as well. And so what you want to do, if you haven't already, is complete those 2 rounds of Lotus Blossom. So thinking about ideation in terms of your own classroom and how you could use it effectively outside of this project as well. And then you also want to think about different strategies or questions that you may come up with to help students who might be stuck. Thank you so much.